Imagine being captured and taken far from home, only to be sold as an enslaved person to a foreign land. For many white Europeans, this was the harsh reality of life in the Ottoman Empire. Follow one person's journey as they navigate the challenges and struggles of life as a slave in this powerful and often overlooked chapter of history. The Ottoman Empire was one of the world's largest and longest-running empires, lasting 623 years, from 1299 to 1922, and covering 3 continents, including the Balkans in southeastern Europe, Arabia and Central Asia, and coastal northern Africa. Like many great empires before it, the Ottoman Empire was founded on slavery, but unlike most examples of slavery, slaves in the Ottoman Empire were white. The bazaars and Turkish baths were generally the focal points of Ottoman social life. Because many people owned homes, the population was relatively constant. People of the same ethnic group or religion sometimes resided in separate quarters. Turbans and other headwear denote rank and position in Ottoman society. Scattered statistics and plausible extrapolations about the volume of the slave trade from Africa to the Ottoman Empire produced an estimated number of 16,000 to 18,000 men and women trafficked into the empire per year for much of the 19th century. It was estimated that enslaved people made up 20% of the population in the 16th century. The Ottomans' economy was inextricably linked to the ownership of slaves. Because it was a large country, the vast work demanded more workers. As a result, they required slaves to assist them with various jobs. The law enabled the sultan to keep 1/5 of the booty collected by the warriors in battle. While loot was typically defined as material items, the sultan regarded human captives as part of the spoils. The sultan used these captives to form an elite corps of slave soldiers known as the janissaries. Aside from the planting and harvesting, plantations and farms required various other forms of labor. People who were enslaved had to clear fresh land, dig ditches, cut and bring wood, kill livestock, and repair buildings and tools. It's important to note that the Ottoman Empire practiced slavery, but not in the same way as the transatlantic slave trade that occurred in the Americas. In the Ottoman Empire, slaves were typically captured during wars or purchased from slave markets and were often treated as legal property rather than as human beings. As a slave in the Ottoman Empire, your life likely would have been difficult and uncertain. They may have been assigned to work in various roles, including as a household servant, a farm worker, or a soldier. Their daily tasks and responsibilities would have depended on their assigned role and the needs of their owner. In general, slaves in the Ottoman Empire did not have many rights and were subject to the will of their owners. They could be bought and sold, punished, or even killed at the whim of their owners. Slaves were not allowed to marry or have families of their own, and any children born to slaves were also considered property and were owned by their mother's owner. Despite the harsh realities of life as a slave, some slaves gained their freedom through various means, such as converting to Islam or purchasing their freedom. However, the path to freedom was often difficult, and not all slaves could achieve it. In Islamic law, slavery is not based on race or ethnicity. While there was no legal distinction between white European and black African slaves, they were employed in different roles in some Muslim societies. Especially, the Ottoman Empire made white slaves from Russia and other states serve as soldiers and government officials, while black slaves were placed as guards at palaces and elite families' harems. Slavery in the Ottoman Empire is not a topic that is regularly explored in literary circles. The Muslims have chosen to completely oversee these large-scale, heinous atrocities against the captive population. Professor George June of the University of Colorado wrote a book on the issue in which he discusses the importance of eunuchs in the Ottoman Empire. He tells how the Ottomans purchased slaves after assessing their worth in terms of performing arts and financial ability. Among other things, slaves would be paid according to their abilities and assigned chores accordingly. June recounts how a black slave would be utterly removed from family and friends in his novel. One of the various conventions utilized by the Ottomans to manage kuffar was the practice of eunuch making and its institutionalization. The fundamental distinction between white and black eunuchs is that the white eunuchs just removed their testicles. The black eunuchs were entirely shaved, meaning everything was removed. The white eunuchs were obtained by the Ottomans from Christians and Jews. The black slaves, who later became eunuchs, were abducted. After that, they either ended up as guards in Sultan's harem or in Istanbul, where there were many very wealthy men with their harems. Throughout the Ottoman Empire, this occurred. As Turkey attempted to become more European, Kemal Ataturk abolished practices such as harems and the eunuch system. The Ottoman Empire, which desired to push its influence far and wide, also had a legendary swarm of pirate ships that would sail to European countries and steal their territory. They will also bring a huge number of European slaves with them. During one siege, the pirates seized individuals from their homes, markets, and crevices of mountains where they were hiding with their families, according to one particularly terrible story of how the Ottoman pirates arrived in Iceland and transported people to the slave market in 1627. During this procedure, the pirates set fire to the churches and murdered individuals who were no longer useful to them, including the older pastors. Those deemed suitable for trade were brought aboard the pirate ship, which soon set sail for Iceland. According to the narrator, one pirate was careful about washing himself every day, even having others wash his body. One woman on the ship, the honest Helen, told the narrator that the same individual had murdered her husband. When the ship arrived in Algiers, all of the Icelanders were taken to the slave market, where they discovered a large number of other individuals being sold. The Ottoman Empire's slave system was substantially different from plantation life in the United States and the Caribbean. Males might be military or domestic slaves, while females were nearly invariably domestic. There was also a racial hierarchy at work inside the gender segregation. African women were assigned menial jobs like cooking and cleaning, while white European female slaves were assigned to more specialized tasks, such as making and serving coffee, attending supper trays, and functioning as nursemaids. Visitors from Europe in the 19th century claimed that slave women had an astounding amount of leisure time and freedom of speech and action within the harem. They considered slaves as lives superior to domestic servants in the West. Slavery was also just temporary. White women were forced to serve as slaves for 9 years, but black women from Africa were only forced to serve for 7 since they were deemed less suited to a colder climate. When a woman was emancipated from slavery, she was given a legally binding emancipation certificate. She might choose to live with her previous master's family for the rest of her life, or she could marry. If she chose to marry, she was given a trousseau, jewelry, household furnishings, and in some cases, her own house. The liberated slave earned a life pension from their former master and maintained close relationships with their old family. As a result, slavery may be viewed as a means of upward mobility, a social ladder, rather than a mark of contempt. As a result, many young girls from impoverished households volunteered to become slaves, or their relatives sold them into slavery in the hope of a better future. Others may be captured during tribal attacks and sold for a profit to slave traders. Slavery, whether voluntary or forced, was viewed as a transitory phase leading to social improvement by both children and parents. Another draw was the gentle treatment of slaves in Ottoman harems. Young slave girls were nurtured as family members, typically purchased at 6 or 7, or even as infants when provided with wet nurses. The infant would be given a new name and placed with the skilled slave lady. The child slave ate the same meals as the family and wore identical attire. She was taught intricate Ottoman etiquette and practiced by serving elder slave ladies before serving the family directly. She would be taught to speak and read Turkish, as well as Islam's fundamental principles and practices. She learned to sew and embroider, and if she had musical skills, she taught herself to play an instrument, sing, and dance. Young female slaves were sometimes purchased as companions for the family's young girls and educated alongside them. They learned to read Persian, Arabic, English, and French. Some trained to be nursemaids for the family's children. They were married to Ottoman males once their term of servitude was over, or they were released before their term was completed, as the emancipation of slaves was considered a moral act in Islam. Because of their beauty, charm, and refinement, these ladies were greatly sought after as wives and frequently married into the families in which they had grown up. Keep on going deep into history and bring the never-heard stories before the world.